Hi everyone, this is Chelsea, and today I'm going to be walking you through how to draw the zigzag pattern that we practice in our Occupational Specific Essential Skills class for sewing machine operation. We draw the patterns before sewing them to practice our hand-eye coordination, our hand stability, and to become more familiar with the pattern and the measurements involved. For this task, you will need a pencil. And I really recommend pencil because it's easier to work with and you can erase. I'm going to be using markers like these ones just so that they show up a little better on camera, but you should probably use pencil. You'll also need a ruler that shows inches, and you'll need a piece of paper like this one. Okay. So this pattern kind of has two parts to it. As you can see here, we have the border lines, which you can use a ruler for to draw. The reason why we want to use a ruler is because we want to make these border lines nice and straight so that our zigzags can be even in between. Then the second part that we're going to focus on is making the actual zigzags in between the border lines. The zigzags you will just measure using your ruler, and then you will draw them freehand. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to get my blank piece of paper here, and we're going to start off by making our border lines. So for this one, I'm going to use my red pen. You'll notice in another video that I made as well, I always use a red pen to show which lines you can make with the ruler. And anytime I'm using freehand, I'll use a black pen like this. You don't have to switch, you can use pencil for the whole thing. So I'm going to start off with a blank piece of printer paper like this. It's just an 8.5 by 11 inch paper. And from the right side, I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to measure 1/4 inch in at the top and the bottom. So if you need a quick reminder, 1/4 inch you can find by finding one of the notches and then counting 4. So for me, I would start maybe from the beginning here, and I would count 1, 2, 3, 4. So I know that my 1/4 inch is going to be at this notch here, kind of right above the N and the C of the word inch here. All right, so 0 is my starting point. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so when I put my ruler down on the paper, I'm actually going to line up the edge of the paper with this 4th line right here. And then I'm going to make a notch right at this first line right here on my paper, just to mark where 1/4 inch is. So I'm going to do that right now. There we go. Okay, lining it up. I have my 1/4 inch right here, and I'm going to make a mark just near the top of my paper, just like that. If you can see the tiny dot right there. Then I'm going to go down below and I'm going to do the exact same thing at the bottom of my paper. As close to the bottom as I can get. I know it's kind of hard to see because it's a little dark, but I have 1/4 inch right here, and I'm going to be marking just right there, just so that I can keep the spot. Okay, so now that I've marked both of those dots, I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to line it up with both of the dots that I made. There we go, just like that. And I'm going to draw my line straight down from the very top of the paper all the way down to the very bottom. You don't want any gaps. Okay, so right straight down, just like that. All right, now remember, because we're sewing this, we always want to add in our back stitches too. So I'm going to add in a back stitch at the top, just like a thick little dot like that, and at the bottom too. There we go. Okay, so that's our first border line. we make it a 1/4 inch away from the right side just so that we have a little bit of space from the edge of the fabric if we were to be sewing this. Now the rest of our border lines from there are actually going to be 1 full inch apart. So if you can see on the ruler here, if we were to start right from the beginning, it's really just jumping to wherever the number is, okay? If you want to count the notches, just to be safe, it's 16 altogether. Starting from 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. All right, and that's exactly where my number 1 is. So that means that the next inch after that is going to be where the number 2 is, then 3, and so on. All right, so they're all going to be 1 full inch apart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my ruler back down on my paper, and I can even line it up with the last notch here, right at the very top of my paper, and I'm going to start making marks all the way along. So starting here, I'm going to jump 1 inch, make a mark, jump another inch, make a mark, and so on. I'm only going to do a few, just as an example, but you can fill your entire page. All right, now I'm going to go down to the bottom of the paper, and I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom, the exact same. So I'm going to line it up so that my first notch is right lined up with this first line here that I made. Go. And then I am again going to make notches. Again, I know it's difficult to see because it's dark over here, but there we go. I'm going to just make notches exactly 1 inch apart. There we go, just like that. So you can see these little dots that I made here, 1 inch apart. Then, once you make all of your marks across the whole page, you can take your ruler and connect them down. All the way from the top to the very bottom. Alright, and then you can keep doing that across the whole page until you run out of room over here. Alright, so that's step 1, making the borders. Next, I'm going to switch my pen over to the black one because I'm now going to be doing freehand lines, and we're only going to be using our ruler to measure from now on. Okay, so let's start making our zigzags now. So we have our page of border lines. And so for our first zigzag, what we're going to do is we're going to start in this top section right here. Now we're going to ignore this little 1/4 inch section that's left over here, because like I said before, that's really just a space that we leave so that we're not right at the edge of our paper or right at the edge of our fabric if we were to be sewing this. So we're going to ignore that. We're going to start in this section right here. This is going to be our first row of zigzags that we make all the way across. Now, starting on this second line that you made here, so this is the first line, this is the second line, what you're going to do is you're going to measure a 1/4 inch, and remember how we find the 1/4 inch, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, in from the right. So I'm going to line up my ruler so that the 1/4 inch notch is right along the right edge here. Here we go. And the top of my ruler is going right along this border line that I made here. Then I'm going to make a little dot, just so that I can remember where the spot is, for a 1/4 inch in from the right side. And now I can make my diagonal line. Now remember, when you're sewing, a sewing machine does not sew diagonally. So if you were to put the fabric through like this, it would just sew straight down. What you need to do is you need to turn your fabric so that it goes in the direction that you want it to sew. So that means that we're going to draw it the same way so that we get into the habit of it. So I'm going to turn my paper at a bit of a diagonal here so that if I were to start sewing up in this corner, the sewing machine is going to only know to sew straight down, but what it's actually going to be doing is sewing a straight line diagonal on my fabric. So we're going to do that here on this page as well. Alright, so when we're sewing this pattern, what we would do is we would start by making a back stitch in this top corner here. So remember, we're not going in the corner of the paper because we're ignoring this little space here. We're actually starting right in the top corner of this first line that we made here, the very top of our border. And I'm going to make a little notch here, and that is going to be my back stitch. Alright, so now from there, I'm not going to use my ruler because remember I'm freehanding this, and I'm going to make a line straight down to connect, there we go, to connect to that notch that I made before at the bottom here. And remember, the straighter the better for this. So I'm going to start up here, and I'm going to make my line straight down to connect. I'm making just very short, sketchy lines to make sure that it stays as straight as I can make it. Okay, great. So that's our first line. Next, what we would have to do is go back up this way. Now remember, just like a sewing machine does not sew at a diagonal, it also doesn't sew backwards. So of course what we're going to have to do now is turn our paper. So we're going to turn the whole way around so that our paper is now at a diagonal. There we go. Where we can now, go this way, where we can now sew or draw down this way. Okay, so we should have our paper at a diagonal going this way now. And again, I'm going to use my ruler. Now, the first zigzag line is always a 1/4 inch away from the edge. So that's what we measured over here. All of the other zigzag lines are going to be 1/2 inch apart. Okay, so that's a bit of a different measurement. We haven't used that one yet. And it's going to be 8 inches in from the beginning. So again, if this is our, notches. So if this is our starting point, right, 0, we would count 8 notches in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is our halfway point right here. This is 1/2 inch. You can also see that it's a little bit longer than some of the other notches near it. You might notice the same on your own ruler. And you can also see that it's the notch that's exactly right in between the starting point and the first number here. So it's right in the middle. That's the notch that we're going to be using for all of the other measurements for the zigzags. Okay, so to measure this now, I'm going to start right at the beginning here, right where I made that first back stitch for my zigzag. And I'm going to line up my starting point of my ruler, so the first notch, right with the edge of the paper here. And I'm going to line up the top of my ruler so that it's going right straight along that border line that I made. And then I'm going to count in 8, or I'm going to look for that longer notch, or however is best for you to find 1/2 inch. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'm going to make a little dot right there. Just small, just so that it marks my place. Then again, I'm going to take my ruler, I'm going to put it away because I don't need it now. And remember, my needle, if I were to be sewing this, left off right here. So that means that your pencil is going to go from here, from this point where you left off, all the way down to this point that you made here. So we're never sewing, or we're never drawing away from us like this, because that's not how we would sew it, right? The needle left off here, it's in our fabric here. That means we need to continue sewing down like this. Okay, so let's try that. So from here, I'm going to make the straightest line I can down to connect that dot. And you can really take your time with this, make sure it's nice and straight. Here we go, just like that. So now I made my line straight as possible, just so that it touches that border line that I made there. Okay, great. So next, again, we need to turn our paper, because we can imagine our sewing needle is in our fabric right here, so we need to pivot around it. And we are on a slant going this way now, just like the first line that we made here. So now again, taking my ruler, and like I said before, all of our measurements are now going to be 1/2 inch. So to do this, now that I have a couple lines in place, you'll notice that my lines make a V shape. So all of my 1/2 inch measurements, I'm now going to make from the point of the last V that was made. So here I have the V, here's the point of the V. So that means I'm going to line up my 1/2 inch with this V point. For myself, I'm putting the 8th notch along where the point is, making sure that my ruler is lined up with the border line, and I'm marking 8 notches to the side. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I get to that beginning notch there, and I'm just making a point. Just a little dot. And I'm doing the same thing that I did before. I left off here, so I'm going to just make my line as steady as possible down to meet that point. And you can also think of it as it's going in the same direction as this first line that you made over here. So what that means is that this line and this line should be perfectly parallel with each other. Of course, then that means that any lines going this way should also be parallel with each other. So I'm going to start from where I left off here and very carefully sketch my line downwards. Okay, just like that. So you can see that these lines are fairly parallel, they're going in the same direction. And so then from there, again, turning my page. So now you can kind of see that the last V shape that was made is this one right here. The last point in the row is right here, so that means that this part right here, that's where I'm going to measure my 1/2 inch from now. So I'm going to take my ruler again, line it up just like I did before. I'm going to put one of the notches right where that point of that V is, lining up my ruler so that it's in line with the border line, and 8 notches to the side, I'm going to make my point. There we go, just like that. And then again, making sure that this line here is perfectly parallel with this line, and making it nice and straight as possible, all the way down. There we go. All right, so you're going to continue that all the way across this first part here. And when you're all done with that, you should have something that looks like this right here. Okay, so this is what it should look like when the first line is completed. I have all my zigzags all the way across, and you'll notice that they are all 1/2 inch apart. except for the first one, which is a 1/4 inch right here. All right, so next up, let's go on to the second line of zigzags. Now, it's a good thing to keep in mind that all of the odd number lines, so line number 1, line number 3, line number 5, and so on, they're going to be exactly the same. And all of the even number lines, which is the line that we're going on to right now, so 2, 4, 6, and so on, they will also be exactly the same. All right, so for line number 2, what we're going to do is we're actually going to turn our paper right upside down, just like that, so that our first row of zigzags is on the bottom of our paper now. Our paper is going to be going up at a slant just like this. All right, and we're actually going to start on the left side for this one. And the reason for that is because it's easier to connect this line down here to make a half of a diamond shape at the beginning. And so I find that starting on the left just makes that process a little easier for me. So now for all of the rest of the lines of zigzags, you actually don't necessarily need your ruler anymore. And the reason for that is because we want to train our eye to have good hand-eye coordination. Because like I was saying before, all of the lines that go in the same direction, they're all going to be parallel with each other. And any line that is connecting down to a line in the first line of zigzags, it's going to be going in the exact same direction. So if you would like to really challenge yourself to practice your hand-eye coordination, I would recommend not using a ruler to measure for this next line and for all of the other lines after that. Your new line that you're going to be following is this first line that you made here. Because now that we're starting on the left side, I'm going to make a back stitch, just like usual. And then my line is going to connect down here, and we can almost think of it as if we were to sew down and then keep sewing, our line should go perfectly straight over this line that we made here. Okay, so without measuring, I'm just going to draw my line as straight as I can down to connect to this line. There we go. And so you can see that if I were to sew this, I would keep going straight down this way, and it would all connect as one big line. Eventually, you want to start to see diagonal lines being formed across your page, and the straighter you make the lines, the straighter those nice diagonal lines are going to become. All right, so now I'm going to turn my page, and in case you get a little lost when you do this, you can always keep your pencil down on the paper like that and pivot around it. That way you never forget where your needle would be when you're sewing. Okay, so there you go, just like that. And now we're going to continue our zigzag going down this way. Now, a couple things that you can look for. Again, of course, diagonal parallel lines. So this line here is going to be a perfect continuation of this line up here. It's also going to be parallel with all of these lines. And you can also think of the end point too. So when you make these zigzags, as you make more of them, they'll start to look like diamond shapes on your page. So just like this one here, see how the diamond shapes form? And so when you're ending your line, you can think, is my line ending directly underneath where the top of the diamond would be? Or is it skewed this way a bit or this way? You want it to be perfectly symmetrical. So for this one, for example, we'd want to make sure that this line that I'm drawing right now ends directly under this point here. So it should be right underneath here like that. And also parallel with this line here. So a couple things that you can use as tools to line up your lines. Okay, so I'm going to draw that line down. There we go. And then again, I'm going to turn my page, and like I said before, you can pivot if it helps you. Pivot around so that you keep your pencil always moving towards you when you draw. And now again, I'm going to draw this next line here, connect it down to this point, and it should be perfectly parallel with all of these lines going this way. There we go, just like that. And then you just keep going, doing that the whole way down. So you can kind of start to see, now I have a half of a diamond shape at the beginning here. Once I continue on, I'll have another half of a diamond shape going this way, and then full diamond shapes going all the way down. All right, so once you're all done that, keep going, and it should start to look like this. So you'll notice I have parallel diamonds all the way across. I have diagonal lines that are going fairly straight across both directions. And if you're not sure if they're perfectly straight, you can always take a straight edge of something like a ruler and put it along and see if they are straight. Okay. And always remember that the odd number lines are exactly the same, and the even number lines are exactly the same. All right, so try that out on your own. See if you can fill the page with these zigzag lines. And of course, use a pencil. If you find that your lines are going off a little bit, erase and try to fix them, because you really want to make sure that you're getting a good eye for this pattern. That way, if you try to sew it later, it'll be easier for you to follow. It'll be easier for you to recognize where the stitches are supposed to go, because you'll have this drawn pattern in mind. All right, so that's it for today's zigzag tutorial. I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to leave a comment below, and I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as possible. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.